Hello everybody and welcome once again to White Hat Media's webinar. So for the next half an hour or so, probably about 40 minutes really, we're going to be talking about how to generate high value leads from digital marketing. This is a sort of shortened version of a talk I've done a number of places, but I've added some fresh stuff in as well. So if you have heard any of my talks or training sessions, then there is some original stuff to share with you at the moment. But it's great to see some faces I recognize, or rather not faces, some names I recognize. And without further ado, and without further rambling by me, we will go on to the actual webinar itself. Right, okay, now then, what I'm going to do is something slightly different. I've not actually done this before. I'm going to talk with specific reference to two particular and very different in many ways industries. The first I'm going to talk about, imagine if you're professional services. Now, I appreciate that you're probably not, but at the same time, it's nice to understand how these things are applied in real life. So rather than get all sort of uber strategic and that sort of thing, I'm going to show you how a firm of professional accountants could generate more leads from digital, good value leads, and at the same time, we're going to look at a software vendor or software vendors. Now, these, of course, have these two groups of people have entirely different ways of approaching things, although obviously they've also got a lot in common. Now, I apologize to the ladies for not having a one of these being a lady. I think it's should be more representative. I was looking for lady techie geek, and it was I was just getting most ridiculous results on the imagery, so I'm afraid we're going to have to run with two guys at the moment. Anyway, so let's just look at this. Now, the reason I chose the accountants, I want you to imagine that the firm of accountants is maybe a branch of maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 different branches, offices in sort of say 3 or 4 towns, whereas the software vendor is going to be national and possibly international. And I'd like to really cover the differences and how we would approach a lead generation activity with those differences. Yeah. Now, the first thing is obviously accountants, they're going to be more localized. So if you've got 3 or 4 offices in specific towns, say in the Midlands or the North or the South, then they're going to have to look at things locally. They're going to have to generate leads within a certain distance or radius because of the way they work. Yes, there are online accountancy systems that one can use now, like Pegasus, Sage, Xero, and so on and so forth. But I'm more thinking of your sort of professional services, your tax advisors, those sort of people. Yeah. And it may be a reasonable sized business, maybe have a few tens of partners and a few offices, but they're still going to be operating locally in specific towns, and that has implications to how they should approach the campaign. Now, with regards to the software vendors, I'm thinking more like a type of online, maybe a software as a service type approach where people can download the software, and so they're looking at more of a national and possibly even international marketplace. Okay, so I'm just going to check again, just to check that you guys can all hear me, which you can, which is great. So I'm going to go back to the presentation. Oh, I never trust the technology. So basically, 2 different approaches: local, national, accountants, local, probably a larger firm of maybe software vendors. Okay. Now, accountants, what they really are looking for is they're looking for meetings with people. Yeah, and as I said, we're not talking about the sort of online services like Xero. We're talking about the meetings. Okay, so they want to meet people. They want to get in front of people. And in this case, for the sake of the example, I'm talking about small businesses. So we're talking about small businesses that is their target segment. So people who run small businesses, people who manage small businesses, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So that's with regards to the accountants. Now, software vendors, completely different. Now, software vendors, they want to either sell straight offline, or possibly, and I've put here, I've showed an example of how many software vendors sell products, which is through events. And of course, the point being is that the channels that we're going to be talking about and the methods we're going to be talking about could easily be used with events, integrated with events. Yeah. So With that in mind, moving on. Now, the software vendor, as I say, all they really want people to do is go to their website, buy the software, and use it. Yeah, but obviously there has to be alternative calls to action. So what is the process? Let's look at how these two different businesses would generate more better leads. Well, the first thing, and this is sort of step one, and I always say this, is put your measurements in place at the beginning of the process. Yeah. Identify what your primary KPIs are going to be. What do you want to be measuring? So let's look at these two businesses, and clearly the way PowerPoint works, the time we've got, I can only talk about the key things that people should be measuring. Yeah, and if you don't measure just these, it's unwise. You need to be measuring. And what I would suggest you're doing, if you haven't run this type of campaign in the past, maybe you've done a bit of PPC, maybe you've done some SEO, I don't know. But if you haven't run this in the past, just do some benchmarking. So look back for, say, the last 12 weeks or the last 6 months to see how you perform in these areas. And classically and predominantly, you're going to be using something like analytics, say, for example, Google Analytics. But if you've had social media products in place like Sprout Social or one of the bigger ones, say Brandwatch, then you want to be measuring. And when I mean measuring, I mean actually counting the numbers over a certain period of time. Okay, so clearly with a firm of accountants, how many inquiries have we had through our digital marketing channels? I don't just mean the web page. How many have we got from any PPC campaigns we've done? How many have we got from any social media we've been doing? And we want to know how many inquiries. Yeah, very simple, straightforward count. But it has to be done. And have you got a chart of this going back a certain period of time? Because if not, whatever you do next, you don't know whether you're spending the money wisely. Another one I put in, because I think that firms of professional services should be in the mindset of creating frequent and regular ebook downloads in the specialisms that they work in. So another one here, another thing to measure, another key KPI might be how many downloads, how many books, ebooks have been downloaded. And if they've been using capture forms or gateway pages, then they're also going to have the data of the people who've downloaded those ebooks. And the third thing they're going to be looking at is something like a bulletin sign up. I'm not fond of the word newsletter, as you probably know if you've been to my training sessions, because they very much tend to be very self-focused. I'm more, I think, a firm of accountants who are servicing, say, medium-sized, small and medium-sized businesses. They want to be keeping people up to date, the major things going on with the budgets, maybe a sort of law changes in business law and that sort of thing, maybe some economic overview, that sort of thing, that are particularly targeted at their audience. Yeah. So those are three things. There could be more. Now, specifically, of course, you've probably noticed that each of these things is a call to action. It's something that someone's got to do on a website, and we'll be looking at that in a second. But really, we can back that up with all sorts of social media measurements, such as how many people like our pages, how many people retweet our tweets, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, most business people I speak to are interested in, what do we get out of this? And that's the key thing. So I'm thinking accountants, I'm thinking professional firm of accountants. These are the things you should be, the numbers that should be at your fingertips. How many did you get last week? How many did you get the week before? And I emphasize the word week because months are different lengths. Google uses weeks to do its measurement as well. And one way of doing it is to sort of call it week 1, week 2 throughout the year, rather than a month, because some months are 28 days. I know that's probably an obvious and trite thing to say, but you need accurate figures on this. Now, what about the software company? Well, the software vendor is going to be looking at pure sales. And of course, the accountant is as well, the accountant's firm are as well, but they're going to be looking at inquiries first that then lead on to relationships with their customers and so on. Whereas the software company, this is going to be more about direct sales straight off the website. Yeah. So people who come to the website, sign up, pay the £100 a month or the £50 a month or whatever it is, and subscribe to their service. The other thing that software companies use a lot of is take the tour video. Okay. Take the tour would be a short video displaying the benefits of the software, how it's used, nice sort of calm voice, maybe a bit of sort of reasonable music behind it, but very short, maybe 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. Different thing to measure and different from the firm of accountants, yeah. And request a demo. That's probably for people who haven't quite made their mind up yet and want to have a demo, maybe actually want to talk to a real live person, maybe want to ask some questions. Typically it would be done online, okay? So a different marketplace. So this is, and these measurements, when you're thinking about your own business, think, what is it we want people to do? Yes, we know you want more sales, but what sort of calls to action can you put straight on your homepage or straight on your landing pages that you want people to do? And if you do want people to do that, can you count that going backwards? In other words, do you have a detailed report at your fingertips right now of how many people did these things? Because if the answer to any of those questions is no, you need to fix that. Okay, so moving on. So guess what? Each of those, as I've said, each of those things that you measure are obviously going to have a call to action. So how many inquiries? We need an inquire button. Well, everyone has one of those. We need free ebooks, yeah? Or we need free registrations to webinars like this one. We need people to be able to do something, and we need free sign-ups to the bulletin. So the thing to do there is to check that you have. Now, don't have too many calls to action, because if you have sort of 20 on your homepage, then you're just confusing people. But 2 or 3 is perfectly acceptable. And this is ways of both creating business and also building your database. And you know, the thing about the call to actions is that the most important thing to make sure you have very in people's face. So when they land on the web page, they should be there. They shouldn't have to rummage around looking for ways to contact you and so on and so forth. And that's really important. Now, clearly with the software vendor, buy now has to be a button. Yes, there are people who have no interest in talking to anybody. They just want to buy something now. In fact, I recently read a statistic that by 2020, something like 80% of all interactions with regards to purchases are going to be done without a single human being getting involved. Second one, again, take the tour. Third one, again, request a demo. So sit down, if you haven't done this, and think about what my major call to action is. And when I mean by call to action, I don't mean a tiny little button in the top right-hand corner saying contact us. That is not a call to action. That is not enough. So what about content? I've touched on content. I've talked about content many times in these webinars, but I want to be very specific about one particular aspect of content, and that is be different. Yeah, be different. About 3 or 4 months ago, we did a webinar on how to come up with ideas. The problem is in both of those industries I've mentioned, both of them professional services, or rather accountants and software vendors, everybody tends to churn out the same sort of stuff. Now, it is very difficult. It's more difficult than you might imagine to be different, but if you're going to churn out the same stuff, then you're going to be perceived as the same as all the rest. So the idea is and the way we talked about it a few months ago was have creative sessions whereby proper sit downs with the team where you can come up with some great ideas for content to put on your site. Personally, I believe it's an absolute must nowadays, now that businesses in the main are becoming publishers of content. We need to come up with original new ideas, and there are many out there. So for example, if this firm was the professional services firm, has it ever created any infographics about the current economy? Has it ever created any infographics about advice to small businesses? Do you see where I'm going? So it's looking at things with regards to the software company. Has it created nice, useful little animations it could put on YouTube? Yeah, it's those sort of things. It's trying to sort of break out from what everybody else is doing. And also, of course, as well as being different, it goes without saying, be creative. You know, I was once told by an insurance company, oh, we're in a really boring business. And then I said, well, what about opera singers and meerkats? They don't seem really boring to me. And the clever people do that, and you don't need the huge budgets that those people have to create those sort of campaigns. There are there's lots of stories about, one I remember particularly is a yogurt farm in Cornwall creating a big stir a few years back because it simply kept a diary with images, with videos about how it made its yogurt. So any size business can do this. Okay, now we're going to talk about channels, okay, and how things may differ. Now the channel, because you're going to have to, once you've got this content, you're going to have to use it. You're going to have to get people to see it, because if you don't get people to see it, then the campaign goes nowhere. So you need, and the whatever people say, there's 2 or 3 primary channels that will drive more traffic to your website than anything else. No matter what people say. One of those is search engine optimization, another one is social media, and another one is email marketing. Surprisingly, that third one, email marketing, is still effective if used properly. That's according to a survey run by Smart Insights, the Dave Chaffee website. So a great site, by the way, if you don't know it. And it's also reflected in sites like eConsultancy, who I must confess I work for and do training for. Okay, so going back to channels, SEO. So what's the business going to do here? Well, the obvious thing, the accountant company rather, are going to have to localize their SEO. So if they're providing tax advice, it's going to have to say tax advice Worthing or tax advice Reading or wherever they've got offices. So they want to be thinking about localization. Pure and simple. If they're offering these services in 4 or 5 different towns or 3 or 4 different locations or whatever it is, then they need to be thinking of localized SEO, yeah, rather than just saying tax advice nationally, because then they just probably won't get a look in unless they've got huge budgets. Tightly targeted, they should be very careful about what sort of services they offer. Now, typically my experience of professional services companies is they do have fairly well-defined services that they offer to a fairly well-defined group of people, and that's where the targeting comes in. So if they're providing tax advice, if they're providing investment advice, or something even more obscure to say a particular vertical, then of course they should be using that in their SEO. And thirdly, low competition. You know, financial service, firms of accountants, when they go local and they go specific, there's not going to be a ton of competition up against them in their geolocation. So therefore, competition is low, which is a good thing, because that means they can, you know, get to the top of Google quite quickly if the right things are done. Okay, but we'll look at the other side of the coin now, which is the vendor company. Now, the vendor company is national, yeah. In my example, it could be international, of course, as opposed to local. So localization for a software vendor, unless it has a particular locality, you know, you really would want to think you'd have to cover so many geolocations. It would be very challenging to do. Sometimes what people do, if they're finding getting top for a particular phrase difficult, then what they might do is pick the major cities. Bear in mind that you need a landing page to do that that's relevant to those major cities. So if, for example, you're selling, say, geolocation software, and nationally, you might say geolocation software London, for example, because of course you will catch a lot of business in that way and probably have a good position on Google if you did that. Broader targeting, by that I mean you're going to have to think about how people use your software. In other words, don't just do the obvious stuff and say this is software that does this. Think about the benefits, thinking about the ways people are going to use your software. Yeah, a really good example is we often talk about the phrase CRM, but what exactly does that mean? Surely that means managing my sales team better. Surely that means managing my sales department better. Surely that means client contact management, lead management, all those sort of things. So you can go for, generally speaking, much broader targeting, and that means more key phrases. Yeah. So in other words, you're going to be going for more long tail stuff is what I'm really talking about, what we call long tail in SEO. And you really want to think of every possible phrase that could actually get you business on that, and obviously not the ones that won't do. So you've still got to stay relevant, but it's a different approach altogether. And you are going to face higher competition. So therefore in SEO, think carefully, because before you start competing with anybody, look around to see who the competition is. Classically, I've been asked by Microsoft partners to compete for the word Microsoft Dynamics. This, of course, is ill-advised because, of course, Microsoft have that well covered. So you need to be thinking about really your competition. Now, how does this apply to you? Because you may not be, or you're probably not, a firm of accountants or a firm of selling software. It applies because you need to think this through. Which is the best strategy for you, particularly for you and your business? And strategies, even within SEO, which is, you know, fairly well understood these days, will differ. And depending on what sort of business you are, where you're targeting, what you're targeting, and who you're targeting determines what sort of strategy you need to take. Okay, now I want to talk about really the channels that you should be using. And this really isn't a sort of one size fits all. Think carefully about the budget that you have available and the channels that you can service. Now, my thinking is, and it comes number one at the top of both of these categories, is LinkedIn. Anybody who is looking for business to business, building their business by encouraging other businesses to use their services, which generally speaking is most companies who are building leads, LinkedIn is a phenomenally good place to go because it is the largest business network in the world, and it has all sorts of things you can do to promote yourself within LinkedIn. Also, and this I really like, you can very, very carefully target your audience. So, for example, you say, I want to speak to, procurement directors in businesses that are somewhere between 50 and 1,000 employees based in the London region. You can do that in LinkedIn. You can make sure that your advertising or promoted posts sit in front of those people. Now, why do I say that? I say that because social media is changing. Social media now realizes the power it has as if it didn't before. And most social media now, you're really going to have to think about paying to get visibility, particularly Facebook. Facebook now have worked on their what used to be called EdgeRank, but now it's called the post filter or something, and it's down to around 2% of people seeing your posts organically. So if you're going to be working social media properly, you should be thinking about putting together a budget you can afford on what we call promoted posts. Okay, now after that, PPC. I think if I was a firm of accountants in a specific geolocations, yes, I would use PPC, but I wouldn't use it nationally. In other words, I would again create an account that particularly targeted on my geolocation and my specialisms. Yeah, and by that, the cost per click would be lower. Therefore, the chances of making a good profit on that would be higher. And LinkedIn and PPC work together, both together would generate the traffic to your site. And the other thing about that, by the way, is don't always think about just promoting your services using LinkedIn and PPC. In fact, LinkedIn, I would promote the free downloadable ebook or whatever it is. Yeah. PPC, again, think about maybe promoting a piece of content or promoting an event you're running locally, but maybe a wine tasting evening or something, but you can target particular geolocations and use PPC to do that. Email I've also put in. Now, don't sort of reel back in horror. I'm assuming that a local firm of accountants is going to already have some form of network locally, and therefore it's going to think about email addresses. The big thing about email, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail, as long as it's personalized and relevant, it is a useful and valuable medium. And those, I think, would be the three main ways that a firm of accountants would be able to generate ongoing leads. Of course, there are others. Of course, there's lots of others. You probably, but specifically, I think those three used together in an effective way would create some good traffic and some good leads. Again, LinkedIn is at the top of the vendors. Yeah, and again, I would think that at a company selling software, LinkedIn is a great way of doing that, as evidenced by the amount of promoted posts I see from software companies. YouTube, why YouTube? Because YouTube is a visual medium, and if you're targeting business to business, you want people to be able to see, for example, how to use your software. So YouTube would be a great one for creating short 2-minute videos, 1 minute, 50, 3 minute, whatever it is, but short videos promoting your software. You could use animations, you could use screencasts, you could use both, you could use talking heads with maybe screencasts behind them. Why do I think that? Well, Google actually uses it very heavily themselves. If Google have their own channels, and actually if you go and look at their channels, they use all of these techniques. They have short, okay, I know they probably don't pay much because they own YouTube in the first place, but YouTube is an effective way. And what always amazes me about YouTube is actually how few technology companies do use it as in a good way, so to speak. And again, one doesn't have to go out and create vastly expensive ads. Yes, if you've got the budget, do that and make sure they're on YouTube. But if you're selling software or indeed anything that's got a visual nature to it, short 2 or 3 minute videos, and we're going to be doing the same thing. There's a piece of news for you. We're going to create a series of small 2 or 3 minute videos on some how-to points, some nice tips, and we're going to start building our channel properly on that. So we're going to take a leaf out of our own book. Okay, and Twitter. Now, why Twitter? Twitter, because you remember I mentioned that software companies often go to trade shows. Do they use Twitter to support those trade shows? Hi, see you at this stand. It's, and start posting on Twitter. I do think Twitter is a very strong, what I call support social media. So it supports other things. You can get people going to places using Twitter. You can get people going onto web pages. So for example, when you launch a new product, that's a great way of using Twitter and announcing it on Twitter and then maybe posting the next day. And also if you're developing a new product, or a new features within your product, Twitter is a good medium. And I think those three, and I would be happy to accept that there would be variants and again would be more, but for the nature of this little webinar, I think that those things, if you're there. But again, the point of the slide is not, or the point of this workshop is not whether you're a firm of accountants or a firm of software vendors. The point is to think about your best channels. Literally sit down and think, what is our best channel? How can we use that channel for maximum effectiveness? Not all channels are good for everybody. That's the point. And also, most companies, most brands have a certain limit, or all companies actually have a limit on the resources they have. So don't waste your resources on things that don't work, which is why, of course, we put measurement in at the beginning, because then we can tell that. Okay, we can sense that. Now I'm going to talk about building process. Okay, and again, as ever with these webinars, one is limited for time. I'm going to try, and we've talked about channels, yeah. And if you go back and you look at some of the previous webinars, you'll see a lot about channels. We also publish an ebook, usually looking at one or two channels. We just recently done one on content marketing, but channels is the way you distribute your message, yeah, and or your content. It's the way you get people's attention, and it should be integrated, and it should be strong, and it should be done properly. Yeah, as I say to people, it takes two minutes to set up a PPC account. It takes a lot longer than that to set up one that actually works. But you will need channels, and you will need to invest time and money into them and resource into them to make them work for you. And they won't always work all the time. There's constant improvement, refinement, and so on and so forth. What then happens is your web page, your web pages rather. Web pages specifically, we're talking about landing pages and home pages, and particularly calls to action. Do you have a website that is as strong as it could be? Have you tested it with real people to make sure that it does genuinely generate business? Has it got clear calls to action that people don't have to faff around to find? They can find them right there where they need to find them. Okay, those are the two first bricks. But the next thing is the third brick or the third piece in the puzzle, and that is to have good systems sitting behind your website. Yeah. Now you will get contacts and you will get sales, but unless you've got robust systems to capture and measure and track what's going on, you're going to be sort of in the dark a little bit. So you need a good, robust CRM, and there are many out there. Obviously, one I can highly recommend is Microsoft Dynamics. You also got things like Salesforce. You've got Acton. You've got Highrise. There are many out there, but have a robust CRM that you can capture your data in. Yeah. And ideally, it should either have a certain feature set, or it should be able to be integrated with another feature set that enables you to automate your marketing and score your contacts and track them. Yeah. So, and when I say track them, I mean track how many times they come and visit your website, track which channels they're using to come to your website. Yeah. Now, I'll gradually go for the rest of the web. I'm just going to go through this. You need to understand how content works with people, because what often happens is people say, oh, someone's come to my website, or someone's given me a business card, I'm going to hammer them, right? I'm going to phone them up and get the telemarketing team on board. And nowadays people are getting a bit wise to all that type of marketing. So really it's a case of sort of expressing your expertise in particular areas so that people trust you enough to do business with you. And the first step in that process is a sort of welcome, thank you for downloading the ebook type of thing. And that to get people, encourage people to consume your content, that's a nice thing to do. And in many cases, in terms of genuine, instead of a return, it may not go nowhere. But that's not the point. You still have to be creating good content frequently to encourage people to click those calls to action, join your webinars, download your ebooks, and engage with you as a business. Now, after that, it's an educational process. You need to explain to people what you do and why you do it, and the difference between good and bad, and how to do things, how things are done properly. So, for example, going back to the firm of accountants, they talk often a language that people don't understand. So simplify the jargon. Talking about the software company, how do we differentiate from one piece of software from another piece of software? But that leads on to stage 3, which was how do you differentiate yourself from other businesses? And that's the third stage. By the time you're differentiating yourself from other businesses, then hopefully you've built a relationship. And that relationship, typically, it can obviously vary, but typically that may go on for months, before people actually trust you. The statistics of somebody visiting a website before they buying anything varies, but I've read numbers as much as 15 to 25 times, depending on what research you read. What people are looking for now is someone they can trust, someone they can work with, particularly in the area of leads and business to business, and that's what they're looking for. And that's why one has to go through a process of this rather than just phone bashing. Okay. So working with your contacts, you need to build the CRM, you need to automate, you need to score, and you need to track. Now, I'm going to go to one particular thing, which is don't assume that everybody who interacts with your website is going to be worth monitoring, tracking, nurturing, and so on and so forth. They're not. In fact, only a percentage of them are. So we need to also be careful about qualification. Okay. Now, the sort of thing, just take an example. When you're qualifying, what sort of things do you qualify through? And it's classic sort of sales stuff, isn't it? How do we qualify a lead? And that's why it's so important that marketing and sales work together. Because when you qualify, you want to know the role of the person. And that's the thing about leads, is ultimately they are people. What role are they in? Are they an influencer? Are they a decision maker? Which are they? Are they a gatekeeper? Are you going to have to go through them to get a decision made by someone more senior to make a decision to buy your services? So what's the role of the person, right? The second one is, what sector are they in? Is it a sector that you're comfortable working with? Is it a lap dancing club? Do you want them as a client? Maybe, maybe not, depending on what you're selling, So what sort of sector are they in as well? That was a bit trite, I know, but I'm really thinking about, is it a sector that you feel comfortable that you can service or provide a product or service to well? Business size. I always find it's really interesting, this one, because there are many very successful businesses that specifically target small businesses. Particularly you can look at some of these like auto site generators companies that are around. They don't mind that it's just a plumber who wants a quick website of sort of 5 pages. That's their target market. And then of course the other end of the scale, you've got the businesses are going after very large brands. Where do you sit in that? And strategically, it's not generally a good idea to be targeting both with the same brand name or the same business. So what sort of business size, where is your sweet spot? Where is your comfort zone? And location. Are you prepared to fly to Glasgow or to Milan to close a deal? So what geolocation? So when you start applying qualification, and remember, you've got the data, and how do you find it out, right? Easy. You go to LinkedIn, because LinkedIn will have all the information about the particular individual, if they're on LinkedIn, and you will be able to identify the role, the sector they're in, probably the business size and the geolocation. If you want to get more sophisticated, there are sites like data.com, and one thing you can always do, of course, is look at their accounts and that sort of thing. So you can identify who you're talking to or who you would like to nurture. And in that way, that's where the high value comes on because the most successful salespeople I've ever met are the ones who focus on the best deals. They don't worry about the stuff that's not going to close or the stuff that's not going to be very valuable to the business. They focus primarily on the best deals, the so-called rainmakers in the sales industry. And that is so true. And the internet, or rather the web, gives us such advantages in that space now because we can learn everything. We can learn an enormous amount about somebody and even what they look like before we've even met them. So qualify, don't just assume, and have a CRM where you can qualify really easily. And typically it may include something like tagging or customized fields or something like that where you can filter out the very best leads for yourselves. Okay, nurture through frequent good content. This is a bit of a pitch because this is actually one of ours. And by the way, if you want this, I realize, just send me a direct message and I'll send you the updated version of this ebook out, or contact us at the end, and no problem at all. Not via the chat room because then it won't. But nurture through frequent good content. So we, as you know, do content, the ebooks, we do infographics, we do webinars. We're looking now to do more with our YouTube channel. And it's the same thing, going back to the firm of accountants, they want to have creative sessions, got some great content, not too frequent. Yeah, and too frequent is a relevant term because too frequent to some may be too infrequent to others. So some businesses, a monthly something is fine. Some businesses, a weekly something is fine. Some businesses, less so. So work out what frequencies work for you guys. And remember also, when people are in your system, maybe, I do very much, not a maybe actually, I think that one should really be starting thinking about more personalization and segmentation so that you're really only sending them content that you know they're going to be generally interested in. Yep. Monitor and track. Now, I grabbed these screenshots from our own systems. I've had to what's it called when you take out some of the data to protect the innocent? I've had to take out a bit of data, which obviously actual names and things like that. But here you can see us monitoring who's visiting our website. Yeah, these are people, they haven't filled a form in. They are simply people who it's done through something called, without getting you technical, reverse IP lookup. So it tracks what servers they're coming from. And you can see here, if you look down this, say multi-visit, so Johnson Press PLC there from Edinburgh have visited our site multiple times. Big Box Storage, I can highly recommend, they're a client of ours. And down there, you see you've got multiple visits from Johnson Press. You can see Lighthouse Systems. We had a visit from Harvard University, which is a multi-visit, so that's quite nice. There'll be someone out there likes our ebooks, hopefully. So that's the tracking of people on the website. The next slide here is activity. You can see I've been monitoring, and this list goes on and on and on, people that have opened the email. Yes, I appreciate there are different ways of opening. Sometimes an open isn't really an open, it just looks like one. I can see particularly there people who've clicked on stuff, redact, that was the word I've looking for. What I've redacted from this is I've actually got the names of the people on the left-hand side. I've just slightly shortened the screenshot so we can't actually see the names of the people who've been doing this. But this is a wonderful little app that basically tracks live, how cool is that, live activity on your web pages, and that's cracking, and I love to do. I actually have it sitting on my dashboard so I can go and say, hey, so-and-so is on our website right now. That's pretty cool. And this one here is, again, this is looking at the email history of one particular individual who is a friend, and I'm looking at basically her traffic on the website. Yeah. So what she's done or what she hasn't done about emails we've sent and that sort of thing. So now, a little bit of a case study before I close off, and I hope you found this valuable. I'm going to go and have a look at the questions in a minute. This is a case study I've used in a few places, sort of globally. I just love the way it plays out, and I apologize if you've seen this before. This is a wonderful website called results.com, and they do create the most brilliant content. They created this white paper called the 5 pillars that deliver extraordinary business results. I just think that's you know, anyone who's in business, anyone who manages a business or owns a business, that's a pretty powerful headline. And of course, I downloaded it, and of course, I read it, and actually, it is a really good white paper. It's awesome. Got lots of resources in, and so on and so forth. This is the bait. This is the content I was talking about. Yeah. And what happened the next day is I get an email. Hi, thank you for downloading results.com execution imperatives white paper. A little few issues with this email. It's a bit long. It's not personalized. It could be better, but it has 3 giant calls to action. This is actually on the email at the bottom. A 1-page plan, request demo, and attend webinar. Yeah, so not bad. And then I didn't do anything on receiving that. I actually did on this one, which, hello, my name is Jeremy. It's personalized, this one, therefore it's an improvement. My name is Colin Coggins. Does that name really exist, I wonder? I'm the business development manager, etc., etc. A few little pointers to point out to you. I strongly recommend you watch our 2-minute video, not video, our 2-minute video. Colin is telling me the exact length of the video, and 2 minutes is the amount of time I can spend at a push, whereas just video it could be 25 minutes, and it's just not going to happen. A few other things about recording of our latest webinar, click here. Also feel free to review our plans and pricing, and then you've got the call to action. So there's 4 calls to action in that email text, but the point about this, it's a follow-up. Yeah, it's an email follow-up. I did not feel invaded when I received this email. It's perfectly polite. It explains who he is and it explains what the next steps are. It's not a heavy sell in any way, shape, or form, and it works with me. Yeah, and that's the point. Always follow up. Yeah, so always follow up on your responses. So once you have filtered and qualified, and once you've identified someone as someone you really would like to talk to, then follow up. And if they don't engage the first time, follow up again. I don't mean plague them with stuff that they're not interested in. That's really wrong. But certainly share things with them that you're confident they will be interested in. Okay, so now I'm going to just summarize the talk, and I just again run through the key elements of what I would call the lead generation engine. The first is properly running channels. Okay, your channels are your way of building visibility, building sales, and getting your name out there. And I say properly running, you know, personalized emails, properly set up SEO, a PPC account that actually works, and social media set up properly, typically with things like off-ramping and ideally some sort of paid element. Yeah. The next thing is your web page. This or web pages. These again have to be optimal. They have to be worked on. They have to be refined. They have to be changed. They have to be kept up to date. And most important, they must have really clear calls to action that are objectives that you want to achieve. Yeah. Then you need to set up your back-end systems, or not so much your back-end systems, the systems that pull everything together. So you need to be collecting data, you need to be qualifying it, you need to be automating responses, and as shown in the last 3 or 4 slides, you need to be tracking what's going on, which people there are engaging with you, which new people have you got, which new businesses could you possibly get to a meeting stroke discussion or to buy your product. Yeah, these 3, if you know, one really should look at these in your own businesses, not so much in a critical way, but in a positively critical way, if you know what I mean. In other words, are my channels working right? And these may not be the right channels for you. They may be, you know, different ones. Is my web pages are my web pages working well for me? And can I measure? And most of this would be relieve stress. You should automate whatever you can. I see people who get sent leads by emails and then having to input them into a CRM. How mad is that? You know, I mean, if someone fills a form in, there are lots of CRM packages out there that will just pull the data straight into no email going, you know, yes, you can get an email alert that you've got someone who's filled the inquiry form in, but surely you don't want to spend even 5 minutes or get a poor intern in the corner of the room inputting all your emails of leads that you're getting. Insane. So a lot of this is about making life easier, but being more efficient and generating more sales. Now, what do we do? Well, there's the demand side of things, okay, and the nurture side of things. And the nurture side of things predominantly focuses on the constant, but right, well-timed. I say well-timed. You don't plague people with information and ebooks and whatever, but at the same time, it's called nurture. But the idea really is it's relationship building by encouraging people to understand that you know what you're talking about, or your products or services are good. And then, of course, measure. Yeah, and by measuring all of this process, and it really isn't complicated to set up. I would say, realistically, if you wanted to set up a process of this nature, I think something like a month to 6 weeks would do it. I say set up, I don't mean manage it and monitor it, but you could build yourself or outsource to someone to help you build this lead generation engine into 4 to 6 weeks. And once you've got set up, it's going to make a massive difference in your degree of sales. Anyway, I'm now going to just go, I'm just going to go to the Q&A section to see if anybody's asked any questions. Let me have a look. Questions, let's see. It's actually a different area from chat. Okay, no questions, no problem there at all. Let's create a hashtag. Let's create a hashtag right now for anyone who wants to ask a question. I'm going to create a hashtag, and I'm going to call it WHM webinar. There you go. That's a bit long, isn't it? WHM web. That'll do. WHM web. That's nice and short, so we can get you more of your 140 characters in there. So WHM web. If you post a question under that hashtag about any of this workshop, I will be monitoring that. I'll go and check it out. I've got another meeting to go into about 3 o'clock. I'll come back and check out if there's any questions. And of course, as ever, feel free to email us or email me personally. I'll give you my email address in a moment. Feel free to contact me via DM, via LinkedIn. If you're not linked in with me, let's link in anyway. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar. I hope it's given you some food for thought. Of course, as an agency and as a supplier, we can work with you with any element we've discussed. You know that anyway, and we'd be loved to do so, no matter what the scale of the project is. It'd be great to work with you guys. I said I promised I was going to give you my contact details. So this is my personal email address. It's jeremy.spiller@whitehatmedia.com. Twitter, don't direct message me via Twitter, by the way, because I get so many much spam from Twitter. But by all means, if you use my name and tweet, I'll see that. You're probably seeing, I think a bit of a moan up about a survey they were doing on the A27 yesterday where we had 2-hour delays. But fortunately, a journalist has noticed, and he's now got to go and give him a quote on that. Anyway, that's a complete random aside. LinkedIn, I love, and more than happy to link in, and also I've put a phone number in there which you can call as well. So lots of different ways of contacting us. I imagine I'm looking at some of the people here. I can see various friends anyway, so we know each other already. Thank you very much for spending the time to listen to this. I know in your lunch hours and so on are valuable. If it is your lunch hour, if you're listening from abroad, it's probably not. But thanks again, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one. And this is the contact details again of the business. So if you want to prefer to go White Hat, that's us, or myself, that's there, Jeremy Spiller, and I'm all over the web. It'd be lovely to talk. So thanks again, and see you at the next one. Bye.